Well, this didn't work. A few years back, I did a video on the Swan Defined Risk portfolio, which I am a big fan of, actually. I can't find the video. I didn't title it Swan Defined Risk, unfortunately, so I can't define it. I can't find it in my plethora of videos I've done. The Swan Defined Risk portfolio is a hedging strategy. They buy the S&P 500 ETF and they sell put options against it. It's a true hedge. I can't remember exactly what else they do, but it's literally a true hedge. They're buying options against it to protect the downside. So far this year, though, hasn't protected the downside, not to the extent that one would have thought, actually. So let me show. We'll go in a little bit more detail, but I was disappointed, to say the least. Now we're only in May, so there's a lot of ways to go yet in a year. But in terms of downside risk protection, it hasn't accumulated the way I was hoping. I don't own this, by the way, and I like these guys, Randy Swan, and I think it's his brother, I think out of Colorado. Swan Defined Risk Fund, Class A shares. Now, you can buy the separately managed accounts, an SMA, directly through Swan. I think the fees, it ain't cheap, though, that's for sure. But you can, and that way you don't have to have the mutual fund. You're just literally giving them your money. And I think it's hard to do. I think this is an IRA account, if memory serves. You can have the fund inside an IRA. I just don't think they do the actual separately managed accounts inside an IRA. I might be wrong. It just seems like I have that in my head. Anyway, long story short, so Swan Defined Risk. Let's go to year to date. And I was kind of like, oh man, I was just disappointed, man. So year to date, they're down about 11.5%. And that stinks. And if we go to the chart, we'll look at the Swan compared to S&P 500, which is, I got to compare it to, what do I got? I got paired of Ginnie Mae and S&P 500. So Swan is in, what is Swan in? That dark blue. All right, just pull this up a little bit. Actually, yeah, right there. Swan's this guy right here. This is the S&P 500. Here's Ginnie Mae. So Swan, you're down 11%, 11.4%. So if you had $100,000, you're sitting at 88.5. The S&P 500, you're sitting at 82,000 after started with 100,000 year to date, and the Ginnie Mae, you're down to 93,000. So the Swan hasn't done anywhere near what the Ginnie Mae has done in terms of downside risk protection. It just has not. Of course, it has done better than the S&P 500, which I'd hope. But the problem is the Swan is just not cheap, man. Let me show you what I'm talking about. And this isn't the slight thing. I have no idea what's going to happen in the future, but the expense ratio is 1.5%. They're not showing it here, but that's the expense ratio. If we go to performance, let's go to 5 years here. Actually, let me go to Schwab instead. $100,000 year to date. You can see we're down. The Swan is in the dark blue. Like I said, we're down to about, I can't tell what that says. Is that year to date? Yeah, $9,000. 91.33 when you factor in dividends and all that. The other Yahoo is just price, which is what drives you crazy about Yahoo. But you can see year to date we're down 11.41. That when you factor in dividends and whatnot, we're still at $9,100. But that, still, man, look at that. Now we look at 10 year, 5 years. The Swan is in blue. $10,000 is up to $12,379. So we've only made $2,379. And then if you look at 10, we made all $15,000, all $5,000 over 10, and that's not going to get the job done if we're taking on the chin like we've taken on the chin relative to what we've done so far this year. I was disappointed, not going to lie to you, and I don't yell at these guys or anything. It's just it kind of not much of a turnover, only 11%. Expense ratio I think I saw is like 1.51. I saw 1.52. That just sucks, man. I was hoping that this would provide better downside protection, and it just hasn't, man. So you can see right here, the fund seeks to achieve investment objective by directly buying securities that are represented by S&P 500, exchange traded long-term put options on the S&P 500 for hedging purposes, and buying and selling exchange traded put and call options to generate additional returns. So we just haven't seen the downside protection that I was hoping for. So let's check out my man Craig Israelson, see what that has done. Now, I can't see the year to date on this. This is the 712 portfolio, but last year Craig was up on the passive ETF about 6.5. So the S&P 500 was up more than that, and the balance index was up much more than that. But 20 years, because we didn't take on the chin nearly to the extent that this is actually not even representing Craig as well as it could. Craig Israelson over the 712 portfolio. Because he missed out 2001. And both those years, Craig was doing this, and both those years showed it actually quite well relative to the S&P 500. Anyway, point being is, even after the run that we've had with the S&P 500 over the last few years, the 712 has actually held its own. 7.25, 7.75, depending on active versus passive, versus 9.5 for the S&P 500 and almost 8% for the balanced fund. So the 712 has done well. And that, again, if you put the 2000 and 2001 in there, it's done incredibly well. So I'm a fan of this. Now, what exactly does the 712 have in it? I think this will show us the, right here. You're going to have natural resources, real estate, commodities. So these three things right here are definitely I don't want to say, what's the word I'm looking for? Not diversified. Somewhat non-correlated to everything else. I say somewhat, but right now these two, inflation-protected bonds and commodities, have really done well so far in terms of last year to date, for sure. So that probably means if we look at the portfolio for 712, it probably has done quite well over the last year, just because it has a 12th where it takes 7. Well, let me show you again. So what is 712? We go over here, right? It takes 7% in these 12 different buckets, if that makes sense. So you got cash is one, commodities are the other, inflation protected bonds are the other. So 21% of the portfolio is in those three things, which have done quite nicely so far this year. Anyway, so I imagine the 712 is probably doing okay relative to everything else. I don't know for sure, but because he hasn't put the year to date, and I haven't taken a whole lot of time to look at it. But I'm a big fan of Craig. And I interviewed this guy about 2 years ago. Anyway, so that's interesting. So let's just revisit the SWAN defined risk. And you can see they're an absolute return type risk managed approach to achieve consistent long-term returns while minimizing the downside risk. They're always invested in low-cost ETFs on the S&P 500, designed to see consistent long-term returns, aims to protect clients during major market downturns, and always hedge using long-term put options. If we can see right here, process, where is the performance? Hold on a second. Here's a SWAN going back to 1997. The SWAN is in the blue. The S&P 500 is the next one, and then actually the S&P, and then the bond index is the third one. So, I mean, look, bond index was down last year. SWAN did great. SWAN was 15%. S&P 500 is up 28%. It got smoked by both in 2020. Again, it beat the bonds in 2019. It beat in 2018. It came in third. In 2017, it came in second. 2016, it came in second. 2015, it came in third, second, third, first, third, first, second. So you can see it's done actually really, really well, but that's not a surprise. So I'm not sure if they need a full year. I'm not writing off, but being down 14% is like, that kind of concerns me a little bit. Now, when you factor in the other returns they have on the income they're generating from the put options, or the options they're selling, they're down 9. All right, so still not bad. Still, I tell you, but it didn't. And no one's saying they can't lose money. I just want to be clear. Look, we are down. SWAN is down. It's hard to see, 4.5 right there in 2008. So it's awful, and then 4.5 in 2011. Again, and 5.52. That's a hell of a lot better than 2008 being down 28%, which is the S&P, 37%, which is what the S&P 500 is. So, while it didn't work as well, it's interesting nonetheless to see how it shook out. Again, I'm a fan, man. I don't own it. And I can't sit there and say you should own it. But it's interesting to see, because downside risk protection is number one. But we haven't seen it as much as I'm hoping for. But that's the point. Right now, the markets have literally, no one predicted the bonds and stocks to go down the way they did. It's nuts. It's every single bear market is its own unique thing. It's my third now. Well, it's really fourth, but that was coronavirus. My third real bear market in terms of any kind of like this is yet to be a true bear market, I grant you, but 2001 and 2, no one saw that the growth stocks would just get decimated the way they did. Bonds did fine and value stocks did fine until 2002. 2008, no one saw the bank stocks get smoked, preferred stocks get smoked, everything gets smoked except for government bonds. Now no one saw government bonds and stocks get killed. It's crazy, man. We've never seen it like this. It's nuts. Anyway, thought I'd share with you. We'll see ya.